Diana. Workers at the Wright City rest area in the state of Missouri found an unidentified torso near some shrubs on June 28, 2004. The victim's torso was unrecognizable due to the extreme brutality of the mutilation. It had no head, arms, or legs, so detectives had an extremely hard time identifying it. This cold case, which required 18 years of non-stop investigation to solve, would be detailed, along with how the police finally identified the torso and what happened to the victim. We are going to Wright City, Missouri, for this case today. For outdoor enthusiasts, Wright City, Missouri is a little city that is sometimes overlooked. There is something for everyone in the area with the variety of outdoor activities available. Whether you want to unwind and enjoy the scenery or go on an exhilarating adventure, Wright City has everything you could ever want. The city has bathing areas, fishing holes, hiking and bike trails, and more. Wright City has an abundance of outdoor recreational possibilities, ranging from riding through its woodland trails to boating on Lake Calhoun. Its broad landscapes and historical buildings make it the perfect place for anyone looking for a true small-town experience. One of the biggest benefits of residing in a town like Wright City is the low crime rate. Knowing they are surrounded by a tight-knit community makes the residents feel safer at night. When a terrifying revelation rocked the small village in 2004, it seemed that this was not the case. The small hamlet of Wright City awoke to a sluggish morning on June 28, 2004. In town, hardly much was going on. Like every other day, a few workers were preparing to tidy up the picnic area near the Interstate 70 Wright City rest stop. Before we continue, we want to remind you that only a small percentage of people who watch our videos are actually subscribed. So if you enjoy our content, consider subscribing. It's free. Now, let's move on with the video. Some were watering the plants, while others were clearing up garbage. To make it easier for guests to sit in the picnic area, a crew of workers was in charge of pruning the trees and shrubs that surrounded it. They had no idea that the results of this cleaning would be so awful that it would take 18 years for even the police to handle it. Some of the housekeeping staff found an odd thing inside the picnic area's deep end while they were pruning the plants. The workmen discovered a carcass when they came closer to look at the weird thing. They were incorrect to think it was a mannequin at first. It was the torso of a woman. No whole body was present. The only thing the workers could see was a torso. No hands, no legs, nothing at all. They knew something wasn't right about this, and they alerted the police to the site. When the police got there, they saw that the woman's torso had 2 surgical incisions around her abdomen and was wearing a black bra. The marks were quickly interpreted by the authorities to be the result of a cesarean section or appendectomy. The cops dispersed and started irregularly combing the area in an attempt to gather more clues. Some police officers found a knife in a nearby sewer that had alien DNA on it while searching for clues. The DNA that wasn't the victim's was also found on the torso by the police. The only problem was that there was no way to identify the victim, even though the police believed that this foreign DNA was most likely that of the murderer. The police failed in their exhaustive search of the entire city for more bits of the victim's mutilated body. It looked like every body part had been cut off and discarded at multiple distant spots from Wright City. Since they were unable to positively identify the body, the police were initially perplexed. There was only a black bra and a torso on the body. It had no hands, no legs, and no face. It may be possible to link the DNA of the missing torso with a relative. However, once more, there are no recognized family members when the body is unidentified. It was impossible for the authorities to visit every residence in Wright City and collect DNA samples because they had no idea if the torso belonged to a resident. The complexity of this case was astounding. Imagine having to identify a body without hands, legs, a face, a family, or even a house. The only way the investigation could have continued was if someone had come up to the police and said they knew the person whose body had been found near the picnic spot. But this is precisely what occurred in 2016, when local police officer Brian Barker was taken into custody and accused of committing crimes. Brian Barker acknowledged to the authorities that he had reported his sister missing in 2006, but that the incident had never been looked into while he was being held by the police. He said that the torso found in the picnic area in Wright City might be his sister's. Brian may have acted in this way because he genuinely loved his sister or just wanted to help the cops get off the hook for some of the crimes he had previously committed. Since his sister had been missing for 2 years, Brian Barker went to the police station in 2006 and requested that they file a report. The police took action at the time, but after that, Brian's case was dropped because neither he nor the police knew where his sister might be. Still, Brian Barker's story did not finish there. Brian Barker was a notorious police officer. While carrying out his duties, he had broken numerous laws and would continue to do so for years to come. Between 2009 and 2014, the Edwardsville Police Department received multiple reports of burglaries related to businesses. The average number of these complaints was close to 24 every year. To make a long tale short, following Brian Barker's imprisonment, the number of complaints decreased to around 6 each year. It was because Brian was a thug in addition to being a dishonest police officer. His trick was to show his police credentials and threaten people while he was robbing or stealing. He was accused of stealing weapons, valuables, and breaking into houses nearby. The court sentenced 43-year-old Brian Barker to 40 years in prison for his offenses. In order to try to have his sentence lowered, Barker may have benefited from aiding the authorities with the unidentified torso investigation. For 10 years, the case remained unsolved due to a lack of clues to identify the found torso. Lieutenant Matt Schmutz of the Warren County Sheriff's Office revived the case later in 2014, and in 2016, investigators chose to give Brian Barker more time. They made an effort to match the torso with his DNA sample. The samples did not match, despite Brian's insistence that the torso belonged to his sister, and the authorities started to think he was lying to get a less sentence. Brian insisted that his DNA be tested again, and so it was, along with samples from other family members. Again, a new sample of DNA was obtained from the torso and sent for examination. DNA sampling is an extremely difficult procedure. The DNA of a father and his daughters might not match, but the father's and the niece's did. This was what had happened to Brian's DNA samples before. They had not matched the torsos before, but the match was made when other family members gave their samples. After multiple attempts to compare the DNA samples of the family members, Ashley Kinnear, Brian's sister's daughter, yielded the most meaningful matches. Given that the first unidentified torso was actually his sister, Brian Barker was not lying after all. At last, the authorities made progress in the case when they learned that Deanna Denise Howland was the owner of the unidentifiable torso. Following this revelation, a further significant problem surfaced. Diana did not have a single surname or known home address. She had taken on many surnames due to her multiple marriages and the fact that she had 5 children with different fathers. A portion of Deanna Denise Howland's upbringing was spent in Edwardsville and Collinsville. Her father was a banker and a union organizer. She did not have a difficult childhood, but as she got older, things got more harder for her. She was also ensnared in the terrifying web of drug addiction. Diana eventually became one of those family members who left the house too often and frequently never comes back as time went on. Because she was an addict and drug dealers got more expensive as police stations spread around the country, she was unable to maintain herself. Diana seemed doomed for a life of hardship. She knew she would never be able to support her family, so she never stayed with them. For Diana, it was more important to support herself, but even that was becoming more difficult due to her drug issues. Diana, poor Diana, took the riskiest route so she could be on her own. She made the choice to become a prostitute. She believed that prostitution was her only means of subsistence. Diana has been involved with multiple guys throughout her adult life while using narcotics in order to increase her income. Because of her publicized lifestyle and profession, Diana had regular run-ins with the law. She was also incarcerated for a long period. Diana's daughter Ashley Kinnear claims that her numerous trips to jail made it nearly automatic for her to escape unscathed. Diana was a devoted mother who loved her kids no matter how she lived. When she was freed from prison, she would make time for her children and see them. She would eat with them and then go out to continue her dangerous hustle. Even though Ashley had spent the majority of her life apart from her mother, Ashley knew that Diana felt the same way about her, even though Diana wasn't around very often. She said Diana never forgot her birthday and would call her each year. Prior to her disappearance, Diana had assured Ashley that she would see the play in which Ashley was performing. However, Diana did not appear the following day, and Ashley became aware that something was off. Diana Dennis Howland also went by the aliases Diana Kinnear and Diana Frolic in addition to her maiden name, Diana Barker. Diana was born in Belleville, Illinois, married in 1991, and had at least 2 children before filing for divorce from her spouse 4 years later, according to court documents. Her relatives could not be found or declined to speak. Diana was cut off from her family and had a nomadic lifestyle. She was last seen in the regions of Alton, Granite City, and East St. Louis prior to her abduction in May 2004. The Missouri State Police are used to looking into the family history of missing persons. A genetic genealogy program helped solve the 10-year-old case of T.J. Emily's disappearance. On March 25, 1990, T.J. Emily went for a walk, but he never returned home. A case was started for a missing person in the same year, but nothing turned up. 2 years later, on March 7, 1992, a skeleton was found in an old, abandoned building, a similar story to Diana's. The authorities failed in their attempt to identify the skeleton's DNA. Years later, when the case was revived, the police collaborated with the DNA Doe Project, an NGO. They quickly determined that T's skeleton belonged to him, J. Emily, via a thorough examination spanning 2 decades. In 2019, yet another horrific case was solved with the application of genetic genealogy. In 1993, 9-year-old Angie Houseman ran away from her family and never returned. Her body was discovered in a protected area close to St. Louis. 9 days after she disappeared, her captor had left her there, and because her lips had been duct taped shut, she eventually suffocated to death. A DNA sample was taken from Angie's cut pants and sent to a laboratory. Years later, the investigators used genetic genealogy to determine that Angie's killer was retired Naval Officer Earl Webster Cox. Going back to Diana's situation, the same thing happened here. The authorities tested the DNA of the murderer found on the unidentified torso and on the knife left at the crime site after learning that the unidentified torso belonged to Diana Dennis Howland. DNA samples were taken from Diana's lower torso, and some of the sample was also found on the knife that the police had found in the sewer. 2019 saw the authorities take a DNA sample from the weapon. The samples were delivered to the lab to be inspected by scientists working on the genetic genealogy program by the police once they obtained the DNA. After running tests non-stop for nearly 3 years, the police were able to gradually narrow their search, and with the help of further advancements in genetic genealogy, they were able to find Mike A. Clardy, the culprit. Mike A. Clardy and his wife were living in Maryland Heights when he was discovered by the authorities. Furthermore, Mike A. Clardy had no vision. But did he not see Diana's horrific murder? No. Mike lost his vision after Diana was slain in an incident that had nothing to do with her. Mike acknowledged killing Diana on the evening of June 28, 2004, following his apprehension. It is important to understand that Mike was neither a criminal or a serial killer before Diana was killed. Never in his life had he been arrested by the police for anything, much less murder. So why did he murder Diana? Mike's account of what happened is that Diana, a prostitute at the time, frequently visited Mike's house on the 3500 block of Dixie Drive in St. Anne. Mike would frequently bring her male clients. But on June 26, 2004, on one of Diana's trips, Mike and Diana got into a quarrel in the evening. The dispute surpassed all rational boundaries, and Mike's fury caused him to go insane. Mike ultimately killed Diana and dismembered her body. Parts 1 and 2 were dumped at the appropriate city rest area, while the remaining pieces were dispersed over Warren and St. Louis counties. The authorities never found Diana's other body parts, despite their best efforts. Mike's family and neighbors were taken aback by his arrest and confession. Mike's neighbors couldn't possibly witness him in this situation. They were unaware that the 63-year-old blind guy would be behind such a horrific murder. Mike has been given a $1 million bond by the judge, and he will most certainly serve a life term. Diana's family's story is undoubtedly a tragic one. Even more tragically, most of her family stopped thinking about her as soon as she disappeared, never realizing what terrible fate had befallen her. Her daughter Ashley Kinnear will always remember her mother Diana and how much she loved her, even though society often links drug addicts and prostitutes with these negative connotations. Ashley was enraged when Diana's killer was eventually found and taken into custody. After nearly 2 decades, Ashley, at least, was able to find closure. Justice had finally been served, all thanks to the relentless efforts of law enforcement and forensic experts who never gave up on this case. While it couldn't bring Diana back or make her love for her kids whole again, it can serve as a message to all killers that their crimes will never go unpunished and that they will always have to face the consequences of their actions. Moving on to the next case. Alisa Lam. Lam Hoey was an intelligent, considerate, and creative student who went by Alisa Lam to her colleagues at the University of British Columbia and popular culture at large. Her horrible demons of bipolar disorder and mental suppression overshadowed her interests in fashion and her gift for writing, casting doubt on the events most believe caused her original disappearance and untimely death. For nearly 6 years, both professional detectives and amateur sleuths have been delving through hypothetical tunnels and peering through magnifying glasses at anything and everything that could perhaps reveal the crucial clue leading to Alisa Lam's death. In an effort to provide a more substantial reasoning based on observable evidence and situational analysis, the unsolved mystery is up for grabs by anyone willing to take on such a mind-bending maze. However, these probes and perusals combined with various observational evidence have only caused headaches rather than answers. This explores the peculiar circumstances surrounding the mysterious death of Alisa Lam. Alisa Lam was born in Vancouver, British Columbia on April 30, 1991, to Hong Kong immigrants David and Yana Lam. Her parents founded a restaurant in Burnaby, British Columbia, and for many years the family assisted in running the well-known Paul's restaurant. Alisa launched her first blog, Ethelfields, on the internet in 2010. She used the platform throughout the following few years to share her passion for clothes and fashion, frequently uploading magazine articles and images of apparel. Additionally, she would discuss her battles with mental illness in public, always afraid of the transcript that would reveal her irregular attendance at college and repeated absences from classes. She did, however, also write openly about her beliefs regarding psychology, emotion, and the human spirit. She recorded her own thoughts in these blogs and shared anecdotes that demonstrated her sharp intellect and ability to think critically. In her farewell blog post on Ethelfields, Alisa declared that she would be moving her focus and online persona to Tumblr, where she would create a Nouvelle Nouveau profile, which translates to News New. Alisa posted dozens of pictures and writings on her page, by herself and other authors. Her passion for experimental art and design, fashion and culture, and classic literature and movies was evident on Tumblr. Amid these fascinations were shards of gloomy, melancholic imagery, suggesting a deeper sorrow and a confused psyche filled of monsters, melancholy, and suffering. As a matter of fact, Alisa has a past filled with a few mental illnesses. Her family concealed this story for several months following her death and disappearance. She was specifically diagnosed with depression and bipolar illness. In addition to causing depression, bipolar disease also produces manic or hypomanic episodes, which are aberrantly elevated moods. Alisa took a variety of drugs, including mood stabilizers, Wellbutrin, and Dextrin, to treat these conditions. Because of these difficulties, Alisa managed to function for the most part of her life without experiencing any significant consequences. Until her tragic trip to Los Angeles in 2013, she had demonstrated no signs of breaking down or endangering herself or others. It's crucial to keep in mind Alisa Lam as a human being. Despite these traits, just like we all are. She was a bright young woman at the University of British Columbia who clearly thought she knew everything there was to know about the world. She had a future, a family, and a variety of interests. That was most essential. Sadly, it was cut short before she could reach her full potential when the mystery surrounding her fate started to emerge in December 2012. The earliest known mention of Alisa's intention to visit a Santa Clara, California, school on the West Coast in hopes of transferring is made on December 21, 2012. On December 28, 1 week later, Alisa posts on Tumblr about losing her phone. On January 5, 2013, after the new year, Alisa talks about getting ready for her West Coast tour and advises, for the first time, meeting people online. Alisa arranges her trip for the West Coast tour a few days later on January 7th, and she posts an extremely unsettling message about the future on Tumblr. Then, on January 9th, Alisa writes on Tumblr about creating a new Facebook account for the 5th time out of paranoia. She also shares a brief writing she had done earlier that day. There is an introduction before the blurb where she states, "I'm feeling really low today, and this is the very beginning of my depression." Rewind to January 18th, the day Alisa is said to arrive in Vancouver for her tour. After missing her first flight due to getting lost in the airport, she is said to make her way to San Diego 4 days later, on January 22nd. On January 24th, Alisa writes on Tumblr that the majority of her vacation has been made up of things she does on a regular basis back home. When she writes in her piece, "Every now and then, I do something entirely impulsive and reckless," she's hinting at what she did later in Los Angeles. A few days later, on January 27th, she shares on Tumblr once more that she was out at a speakeasy with friends and that she had lost another phone. But this time it wasn't hers. Instead, she had taken her friend's old BlackBerry with her for the trip. The following day, January 28th, Alisa lands in Los Angeles and stays at the Cecil Hotel, a cheap lodging option for visitors, which is located close to Skid Row. After receiving complaints from her anonymous housemates on January 30th regarding her strange conduct, Alisa relocated to a private room on the 5th floor to avoid upsetting the other visitors. Alisa is last spotted on January 31st, the last day of her scheduled visit to Los Angeles, by 2 unidentified hotel employees and, at last, by Katie Orphan, a clerk at the neighborhood bookstore. As Katie notes, Alisa was gregarious, vivacious, and amiable even though she was by herself. According to Orphan, she was also discussing the book she was about to receive and if it would be too heavy for her to carry while traveling. Both of Alisa's parents were waiting for a call because that day Alisa was scheduled to check out of the Cecil Hotel and head to Santa Cruz for the final leg of her trip. Though Alisa had misplaced her temporary cell phone, she had actually called her parents practically every night of her trip. Mr. and Mrs. Lam rushed to Los Angeles to help the Los Angeles Police Department with their search and to file a missing persons complaint after they heard nothing from their daughter. The Lam couple and LAPD searched Cecil and the neighboring areas throughout the first week of February in search of any signs of Alisa. For the first few days, no clues were found since police dogs were unable to detect her scent. Unsettlingly, Alisa's room from when she went missing had no suspicious objects or evidence of disturbances, which was unusual for such an odd absence. In an official web announcement about Alisa Lam's disappearance and case details, the LAPD asked the public to keep a lookout for her profile on February 6th. They held a press conference the following day, on February 7th, but once more, they got no leads or calls from the general public. The largest revelation in the case is then made public by the LAPD on February 14th. An image from a February 1st elevator surveillance tape shows Alisa Lam entering the elevator, pressing a few buttons, and then acting strangely. Although the video was uncomfortable to see, it provided detectives with one last look at Lam's last sighting and raised awareness of the case around the globe. However, the hunt for the missing person would soon come to an end on February 19th when staff at the Cecil Hotel reacted to many complaints from guests regarding poor faucet pressure and strange-smelling water. The worker ascended to the rooftop irrigation system, looked through an open tank, and saw Alisa Lam's nude body floating face up. The water tanks were quickly turned into a crime scene when the LAPD was alerted. A few days later, on February 21st, the coroner's office in Los Angeles declared Lam's death to be accidental as a result of drowning, noting bipolar disorder as one of the disorders that contributed but was unrelated to the primary cause of death. Both the toxicological results and the whole coroner's report were made public in June 2013. It noted that Alisa Lam's body was found naked and that her clothes, along with her watch and keys, were recovered in the water tank that had been found in a sandy particle, but it did not provide any shocking twists to the case. From this point on, during the ensuing months and years, countless of hypotheses, hypotheticals, conspiracies, and straightforward casual chats have been discussed. The conclusions of the LA coroner's office don't seem to be supported by anyone. Numerous people doubted the police inquiry, and even more pointed out potential weaknesses in the final report. In any case, the sequence of events leading up to Alisa Lam's death turned into the most talked about case of the 21st century. The 4 minutes of CCTV that the LAPD recovered from one of the Cecil Hotel's security tapes, which is located in the upper corner of a main elevator carriage in the northern hallway, is without a doubt the most contentious and closely examined aspect of the Alisa Lam's case. Let's watch the majority of the video before delving into its contents. The following pictures should be viewed with caution as they contain disturbing and possibly sensitive content. Although parts of the video are blurry and difficult to see, Alisa Lam is unmistakably the focus of the clip and is obviously responding to something. Even while the nature of that item cannot be explained with absolute precision, it certainly adds to the strangeness of the clip. It begs the question, does Alisa seem to realize that she is being followed as she exits the elevator? She is, one could say, occasionally speaking aloud, if only to herself. The video's rhyme and purpose are impossible to decipher on the first viewing. From the inconsequential buttons she presses as she enters to the deserted halls to her indistinguishable hand and body movements. A bit of debate has emerged surrounding the origins of the tape. Some users on the internet allege that the movie misses 1 minute of the timecode, although it is difficult to detect due to the poor quality. Others claim that Alisa's mouth has been intentionally pixelated throughout the video, although experts have either refuted or completely disregarded these claims. Undoubtedly, the elevator video from February 1st, 2013, which shows the final known photos of Alisa Lam, has sparked legitimate fears as well as ludicrous conspiracies. It is still the most intriguing piece of evidence connected to the case as a whole. The CCTV footage were made public from the day Alisa Lam vanished, and her body was found on the rooftop of the Cecil Hotel. In an attempt to solve the seemingly inexplicable riddle, countless theories have been put out in periodicals and on the internet worldwide. Conspiracy theories are the sole foundation for many of these presumptions. There are irrational theories in some circles that explain Alisa was trying to enter different universes while playing an elevator game. Some people think Alisa was contacted by extraterrestrial visitors, experienced paranormal phenomena, or was possessed by spiritual forces. These absurd attempts to portray Alisa's death as science fiction or the work of occultists are founded on a complete lack of observational data and are linked together by convoluted coincidence claims and exaggeration. For instance, the Cecil Hotel is situated in downtown Los Angeles' Skid Row. The high crime rate and unusual activity in this neighborhood have made it notorious. Both outside and within the hotel, which has a history of murder and suicide, drug sales, and violent crime, are prevalent. While he was horrifyingly murdering 13 people in 1985, serial killer Richard Ramirez, also known as the Night Stalker, stayed in one of the 600 rooms. In 1991, Jack Undevaiga, another suspect in a homicide, lodged at the motel. Suicidal thoughts were often expressed there. In the 1950s, 1960s, and 1970s, a few persons were known to have jumped from the rooftop. It even had the file on another cold case, the 1964 discovery of Pigeon Goldie Osgood's mangled body in her room. The cause of her death is still unknown. Osgood was a former telephone operator. None of it can be directly linked to Alisa's terrible death, even with the Cecil criminology. A far more plausible theory is that Alisa Lam was stalked while visiting Los Angeles, chased through the Cecil Hotel's hallways, and then killed and dumped in the water tank by a different group. This theory seemed sense at first. Recall the several Tumblr postings Alisa wrote at the end of 2012 and the beginning of 2013. She was aware of her tendency toward outspokenness and worried that her words would lead her into trouble at some point. She wrote about unpleasant anxieties on several occasions. "I'm going out tonight," after reading one post. Twice, Alisa expressed her belief that trouble was waiting to happen due to her tongue, saying, "I really need to be removed from society before my big mouth gets me in trouble and I get beaten up, and my mouth is my downfall and it will get me in trouble. I sincerely hope that no creeper approaches me. I already make a lot of dumb decisions. I find it difficult to draw limits, and it seems like I always make the biggest mistakes at the worst times. When I am caught, I have to deal with the consequences of the one time I acted carelessly and took a shortcut." She thus considered this and ignited the fuses of nearby people on multiple occasions. It's possible that she made the mistake of doing it that winter at the incorrect time and place. Lisa's concerns are heightened by the way she behaved in the elevator video. She waits a few moments after her initial entry and clicks the floor buttons before hurriedly approaching the elevator's doorframe. Then, with a frantic peek from side to side, she quickly pokes her head out into the corridor before retreating back into the elevator. She positions herself such that she appears to be avoiding seeing someone from outside by pinning herself against the wall and then into the corner. She returns to the door frame and pokes her head gingerly out of it once more. She then proceeds to maneuver in an erratic manner before hitting other buttons. She seems to be speaking either with her hands or her voice when she steps outdoors for the last time. Still, nobody is seen, and Alisa vanishes from sight. Her movements in the first segment of the video might suggest that she was hiding from someone else, but her erratic gait and confused expression in the second section of the video are completely nonsensical. The Tumblr post concerns along with an unsettling video make you wonder if Alisa's death was the result of a homicide, if she was really on the run. However, there are too many arguments to support this theory. Alisa's figure, for example, showed no traces of physical trauma, including bruises, excluding the possibility of an assault. With the exception of her long-lost cell phone, everything was in order, excluding the possibility of a robbery or attempted robbery. According to the bookstore clerks and hotel staff's eyewitness accounts, she was by herself and didn't exhibit any signs of struggle or anxiety with regard to another person. Alisa had very few acquaintances back home, let alone in Los Angeles, therefore her lack of relationships in a foreign place, and the fact that no other suspects were seen by cameras at the time of her recording helped rule out a planned or gestated murder. Ultimately, there was no evidence to support the theories of foul play or murder, which is why the LAPD and I ruled it out. Having said all of that, there is a catch-22 according to the official assessment of the designated medical examiners and the allied chief coroner. They begin their final hypothesis by cautioning that the small sample size, in particular the absence of blood samples analyzed due to low levels, limits the interpretation of the evidence. When they said that the police inquiry ruled out foul play, they later contradicted themselves by saying that a thorough examination of the case's circumstances and appropriate consultation do not support the idea of self-harm. The way of dying is categorized as unintentional. How exactly did Alisa Lam accidentally climb up a massive cylinder, realize it was the water tank, lift up an incredibly heavy lid, and jump into the dark water if there was no malicious intent on the part of Lam or the second suspect? If the lid had already been opened, why did she choose to climb in as a reaction? Suicide and murder are diametrically opposed and therefore not relevant. The rooftop access was secured by alarms on the doors, and getting to the water tanks took strength and agility, which has led some to believe that Alisa was murdered by someone else. It has been clarified, though, that the hotel has 4 distinct ways to access the roof, 3 of which are via fire escapes without alarms, and that the water tank lids were either unlocked or lighter than first thought, making them simple to handle for a woman Alisa's size. Thus, We need to strike a compromise between the two theories and rationally speculate as to how such a particular, undeniable combination of events may be classified as an accident. The hypothesis that makes the most sense and is supported by the evidence is that Alisa Lam's battles with bipolar disease caused her to experience a manic episode on February 1st. We have to start by thinking about the toxicological reports. Alisa was administered 2 different antidepressants, the metabolites of which were either directly traceable to her liver enzymes and cardiac blood or identified through indirect means. Among these medications was bupropion, which has been linked to bipolar disorder mania on occasion. Alisa's antipsychotic medication was absent from her bloodstream, but metabolites from another mood-stabilizing medication were tracked to her enzymes. To summarize, Alisa had taken only 1 prescription medication on the day of her death and had only recently, if at all, taken the others in the days preceding her passing. The toxicology report also verified that Alisa did not possess any alcohol or other recreational drugs in her system. This eliminates the chance that she was under the effects of drugs or alcohol when she was being filmed in the elevator, or that these factors motivated her to enter the water tanks. Rufe's liver, or rohypnol, was not tested for in her case. She expelled all liquid waste urine, including any traces of ketamine, drug paraphernalia, or even Rufe's, because there was no urine in the system. Taking into account the details surrounding her past mental health issues and the sparing use of prescription drugs, we now need to define mania precisely. Psychotic symptoms such as delusions, paranoia, catatonia, hallucinations, and insightlessness can be present in severe mania. The expression disorganized yet appearing singularly focused is used by a mental health specialist to describe Alisa's tendency to press elevator buttons randomly and appear to be following some sort of goal or direction. Psychomotor agitation, or repeated, aimless, or inadvertent motions and activities, is another symptom of manic symptoms. These motions and actions are reactions to restless feelings brought on by elevated worry. Physician. In a medical journal, Daniel Morrow notes that these behaviors might lead to frequent hand-wringing, pacing, and undressing. Alisa demonstrated all 3 of these actions in the elevator clip as well as in and around the water tanks. Alisa Lam's effort to climb the roof may have been a result of delusions or hallucinations. We don't know what they might have been, and it would be disrespectful to Alisa's memory to presume and make up stories about her mental condition. It's crucial to remember that manic hallucinations can also show as tastes, smells, touches, or sounds, which could be another reason for her clothes removal. Apart from the erratic medication administration, Alisa's isolation in a strange country and her lack of touch with her family could have potentially triggered a manic episode. Alisa was living with folks who had to shift her to a separate room because she was acting strangely and disturbing the other visitors, according to the people she had been staying with since she reserved a shared room with them. She may have developed mania as a result of the added isolation trigger, which may also have contributed to the reason she spent the rest of her stay in LA alone. The final encouraging piece of evidence for this notion comes from a testimonial we obtained from a confidential resident from Los Angeles, California, who goes by Resident A and requests anonymity for themselves and their family. Resident A, who had little to no prior knowledge of this scenario before learning about our inquiry into Alisa Lam's case, informed us that, a few years ago, they had a family member in Mexico commit suicide due to manic depression or bipolar disease. According to Resident A, the family member drowned after falling into a comparable industrial water tank. Additionally, according to Resident A, this was a regular event for the family member who, due to their bipolar disease, would seek out bodies of water whenever they were experiencing manic episodes. This family member was approximately 35 years old when they died, according to Resident A. However, they had been mentally sick for more than 10 years, had a tendency to run away, and had always been drawn to water. Although there is no connection between this case and Alisa Lam, it is interesting that both cases feature confined bipolar subjects who drowned due to an unconscious attraction to H2O. We are really curious if there are more circumstances similar to this one, but there hasn't been much research done in the medical or psychological fields on this occurrences. If anything, it shows that Alisa's choice of the water tank at the Cecil Hotel was a terrible sign of her mental illness rather than a mysterious motivation. Ultimately, after considering all available data, scientific studies, and cultural norms, we have concluded that the chief coroner's initial report, which said that Alisa Lam drowned inadvertently and that her death was indirectly caused by bipolar disorder, was accurate. Other theories were mentioned in passing, but were not given any serious thought due to their total lack of observable support and imaginative beginnings. This case has generated endless rumors and conspiracies and fascinated followers worldwide, since it is difficult for people to accept harmless, straightforward explanations for complicated and disturbing circumstances. In addition to being greatly misunderstood, psychological diseases are also highly stigmatized. People find it difficult to accept the idea that Alisa Lam had bipolar disorder and was experiencing hallucinations because they believe that to be simply in her imagination. It's far simpler, instead, to construct our own stories about what we would like to have happened, something far more interesting or fanciful than mental illness. For instance, the fact that Lam's cell phone went missing and her Tumblr was active for months after her death led some to speculate that there was a third party involved. However, the truth is that her original phone was lost weeks prior to her trip, and Tumblr will temporarily resurrect active accounts with posts that resembled their prior content. The fact that Alisa managed to sneak onto the rooftop and into the water tanks was another thing that baffled everybody. But after the Cecil Hotel was sued for its part in Alisa's death, it's all very clearly stated in the uncontested material facts and supporting evidence section of the motion for summary judgment form. According to Box 10, the rooftop access door features an electronic alarm system that notifies hotel staff when it has been opened. Box 14 reports that the alarm for the rooftop access door was not set off at any point in January or February 2013. This indicates that Alisa reached the rooftop via one of the 3 fire escapes, as demonstrated on YouTube, potentially by a deliberate Cecil Hotel visitor. Furthermore, as stated in Box 20 of the request for summary judgment, it is possible for someone to reach the water tank by ascending to the top of an elevator utility room and then leaping down into the water tank from above. The elevator utility room shown in this picture is easily accessible by a red set of stairs and a connected ladder. When compared to the size of a human depicted above, the jump from that building to the water tanks is likewise extremely small. Regarding the elevator footage, our narrative-driven brains want to imagine the corridors on each side of the lift to be teeming with monsters, criminals, and otherworldly occurrences. Yet on February 1st, 2013, there was nothing of the kind. It is up to us to believe that the sad unpredictability of mental illness created those emotions and the actions that followed them. Only Alisa Lam fully knows what she saw and felt the day she passed away. Ultimately, Alisa was a young lady who had just experienced severe emotional ups and downs, an identity crisis, and growing concerns about her life's purpose. She was aware of her impending sadness to some extent, and she acknowledged on the internet that she could discern, after the fact, that she was beginning to exhibit impulsive and dangerous behavior, a clear indicator of possible manic episodes. She was roughly the age at which a lot of young people begin to exhibit what are known as breakthrough signs of inclinations toward both schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. The unfamiliarity of Skid Row Los Angeles, probable sleeplessness, and a lack of appropriate medication exacerbated her disorientation and ultimately led to mania. Alisa Lam's tragic, horrific death was not caused by a single factor. Rather, it was a confluence of events and circumstances amplified by serendipitous video recordings that fostered a colossal degree of thoughtless internet conspiracy. Let our investigation into the peculiar circumstances of Alisa Lam's passing serve as a first step toward eradicating the stigma associated with her struggles with disorder and mental illness in general. Alisa was a stunning person with boundless potential. Like everyone else, she had hobbies, interests, and dislikes. Her family continues to cherish her memories. It's time for us to follow suit and learn from her example. Take care of people who are struggling with mental health difficulties and talk about them before they start another convoluted story similar to Alisa Lam's. Moving on to the next case. John Harris Jr. On February 4, 1989, at around 4 in the morning, a man broke into an apartment in San Mateo, California. Then he entered the victim's bed with a knife. A bandana was draped over his face. After attacking her indecently, he stabbed her. After calling 911, the victim subdued her attacker by some means. Fortunately, the woman lived, but she was unable to identify the unidentified male. The suspect's DNA was taken from her body and preserved for potential use at a later time. Investigators identified the suspect via genetic genealogy in December 2020. He was recognized as John Harris Jr., age 55. The arrest occurred in February of 2021. Right now, he has a booking in the main San Mateo County Jail. A $500,000 bond has been posted for him. It is my wish that the detectives look into if he is connected to any further crimes. Moving on to the next case. Sharon Prior. At the age of 16, Sharon Prior was residing in Pointe St. Charles, Montreal, Canada, with her mother. She was characterized by her family and friends as a trustworthy, amiable, and gentle adolescent who avoided difficulty. Her twin sisters mentioned that she cherished animals and aspired to work as a veterinarian. Sharon painted Easter eggs for the impending Easter holiday on Saturday evening, March 29, 1975. Sharon left her house after dinner with her family to go to Marina's Pizzeria with pals, as was her weekend ritual. Sharon was scared to walk outside because she didn't want her suede jacket to get ruined because it had started to shower. Her mother gave her the reassurance that the jacket would hold up. Around 7 o'clock at night, a friend saw her cross the street in front of her house. She never made it to the pizza, even though it was just a 5-minute walk from her house. It was supposed by her buddies at the pizza place that she had gone to her boyfriend's hockey game after meeting up with him. When Sharon failed to return home later that evening, Yvonne, her mother, started to worry. On the weekends, Sharon would frequently go out, but she would always make it home by 11 p.m., calling her mother to let her know she would be running late. Yvonne was worried and called Sharon's pals, but they informed her that Sharon was not present at the pizza place. She then called her partner, but he had also not seen her. Yvonne called the police and reported her missing. Police, friends, relatives, and community volunteers all participated in the search, but to no effect. Yvonne appeared on television and publicly begged for her daughter's safe return. A beekeeper would discover Sharon's death in a field at Chemont Dulet and Guillemot Boulevard 4 days later. A buddy had called the beekeeper to let him know that his gate to the field was open. He would frequently shut the gate since the field was occasionally used as a landfill. He discovered Sharon's body and called the police as he was about to latch the gate. Sharon had been killed by beatings and sexual assault. She was discovered with her shoes, socks, sweater, and suede jacket on. Her underwear was discovered on a neighboring limb, and her jeans were discovered a short distance away. According to an autopsy, Sharon passed away about 20 hours before her body was discovered. Before she was killed, it is thought that she had been held captive for 3 days. Because Sharon was found clutching branches in her hands, police also thought that she might have been alive when her body was discarded in the field. About 15 feet from the crime scene, authorities discovered a tire truck, which may indicate that she was carried in a car before being dumped. Additionally, police discovered a size 8.5 shoe print next to the gate, indicating that a smaller individual may have been involved. At the crime site, police discovered a guy's shirt that had been used to restrain Sharon. The man appeared to be of a bigger build, weighing approximately 90 kilograms or approximately 200 pounds, and perhaps standing around 6 feet tall. Police questioned if there were 2 suspects in the murder. From the crime site, DNA might be recovered by the police. A sliver of duct tape hanging from Sharon's hair gave the impression that she had been choked. Police conducted an inquiry and found that a woman had been attacked with a knife in the same area around 7 p.m. the night before Sharon vanished. The woman yelled, drawing attention from onlookers, and the attacker fled the scene. Some conjectured that when he was fleeing from attacking the previous woman, the same man might have bumped into Sharon and kidnapped her. The man in the lineup was selected by the woman who had been attacked just before Sharon vanished, but she wasn't positive it was the same man, so the police had to let him go. 6 years later, Tammy Leakey, a 12-year-old girl, vanished a short distance from the location where Sharon vanished. After a day, her body was discovered. She had been killed by beating, strangling, and rape. Subsequently, an FBI profiler would assert that the murders were committed by the same perpetrator or killers. For a long time, it was impossible to get a full DNA profile from the clothes discovered at the crime scene. But thanks to developments in DNA technology, a comprehensive male DNA profile has now been produced. Police forwarded the DNA profile to a West Virginia lab in 2019. Police quickly discovered that the individual they were searching for was related to the Romine family. Equipped with this evidence, Eric, the detective looking into the case, laboriously combed through databases linked to any previous crimes in the area where she was abducted or discovered. After searching through newspapers, public databases, and other information he could get his hands on, he eventually located Franklin Maywood Romine, a guy who had resided in Montreal the year Sharon Prior was murdered. Franklin and Sharon were barely 9 kilometers apart, or less than 6 miles apart. Moreover, Franklin's physical attributes corresponded with the person who had made an attempt to kidnap the 23-year-old on Wellington Street. The investigator also found out that Franklin had driven a dark red Rambler with tires that were identical to the ones that left a tire print at the scene of Sharon's death. Franklin had a lengthy criminal history both in the U.S. and Canada. In 1964, he was imprisoned in a penitentiary in West Virginia for an unrelated offense. He had fled the prison in 1967 and relocated to Canada, but in just 2 years, he had also accrued a criminal record there. He was taken into custody in 1974 in Parkersburg, West Virginia, after breaking into a home and assaulting a woman. 2 months after being freed on a $25,100 bond, he absconded once more, this time to Canada. He would go on to murder Sharon Prior a few months later. Shortly after Sharon Prior was killed in 1975, Franklin Romine was captured by Canadian border guards and extradited back to West Virginia. He was sentenced to 5 to 10 years in prison there for the sexual assault he had committed in the Parkersburg case. Franklin was never thought to be a suspect in the Sharon Prior case. Sadly, he was never charged since he died in Canada in 1982, not long after being freed from prison in connection with the Parkersburg case. But authorities haven't been able to track down a death certificate that would have revealed more information about how he passed away. When his body was excavated in April 2023, it was discovered that his DNA exactly matched the DNA found at the Sharon Prior murder scene. Sharon's mother, Yvonne Prior, is currently 80 years old and still resides in Canada. Her whole life, she has been looking for her daughter's killer. The family expressed gratitude to the authorities on both sides of the border, citing what they called the miracle of science in locating the teen's killer. Maureen, Sharon's sister, encapsulates the family's viewpoint on this now closed issue. Even if you might not have returned to our home or Congregation Street that particular weekend, you have remained in our hearts and never will. Sharon, you are loved by us. May you now find true serenity and rest. Moving on to the next case. Shelly Ann Warner. At the age of 15, Shelly Ann Warner resided in Mishawaka, Indiana, with her mother, Kathleen Warner. She attended Mishawaka High School, participated in athletics, and played in the band. She said goodbye to her mother on June 16, 1980, and drove her 1973 orange Volkswagen, just 2 kilometers away, to Wilt's store. But she never made it back home as the day wore on. Concerned, her mother called the police. At first, the police believed she might be a missing person or a runaway. However, the case took a terrifying turn as the clock approached the 24-hour mark. The investigators changed their approach and classified the case as potentially abduction. Officers raced to the Wilt supermarket and began questioning staff members who could clearly recall Shelly and making a 1:30 p.m. grocery purchase the day before. Witnesses described Shelly Ann's disappearance from the business in a disturbing way. Witnesses clearly recalled seeing Shelly Ann drive away from the store at 2 p.m. and towards her parked car, which was only 50 feet from the front door. But then something unsettling happened. Shelly Ann was in the driver's seat when a man quickly walked up to her car and opened the driver's side door. Witnesses recalled her astonished, almost scared, expression. Shelly Ann moved to the passenger side as the man boldly climbed into the driver's seat. Sadly, the witnesses were unable to determine whether or not he was carrying a firearm because he had his back to them. The orange Volkswagen Beetle rolled along Lincoln Way and headed east. And with that, Shelly Ann Warner disappeared into thin air, leaving a bewildered town and detectives frantically trying to piece together the odd series of events. The man was described by witnesses as being between the ages of 16 and 18, standing 5 feet 7 inches tall and weighing approximately 130 pounds. Witnesses provided a thorough description of the individual, highlighting his distinct traits that set him out from the crowd, including his medium-length blonde hair and matching blonde mustache. Suspicion had been raised regarding the man's intentions when he was seen loitering about the store prior to the kidnapping. The man may have been dropped off by a friend or hitchhiked to the store, according to the store employees' speculations. Crime Stoppers, law enforcement, and Mitch Iana painstakingly recreated the scene, publishing a suspect sketch in the hopes of eliciting information. Though several suggestions were made, none yielded the vital discovery that the detectives sorely desired. A park and shop establishment in Osceola, Indiana, was where Shelly Ann's automobile was discovered a few days later. Strangely, there were no indications of conflict within the car. Investigators concluded that the culprit may have left the automobile there in order to avoid being apprehended and carry out his evil plans. The unrelenting pursuit of solutions persisted, but the enigmatic circumstances surrounding Shelly Ann Warner's disappearance only grew more complex with each new development. A large search and rescue effort was launched, using search dogs, volunteers, and helicopters to thoroughly search the whole area. The 15-year-old went missing, and despite intensive search efforts, there was no sign of him. 10 excruciating days later, 2 females strolling through a forest discovered a depressing and gloomy scene. They discovered a crumbling sadly. It was determined that Shelly Ann Warner, the missing adolescent, was the owner of the lifeless body. Her body was left in a valley, half-clothed. The forensic analysis exposed a terrifying reality. Twice, Shelly Ann had been brutally shot at close range. Her body had been severely damaged by one shot, and her head had been punctured by another. Kathleen Warner, the girl's mother, lost all hope when she learned of the horrific murder that had taken the life of a lively little child. According to autopsy results, Shelly Ann's body was abandoned about 7 to 10 days prior to her unfortunate discovery. Law enforcement believed the horrific nature of the murder might have been inspired by the urge to sexually abuse her, even though the body was in a well-advanced condition of decomposition. Police questioned multiple suspects and relentlessly followed up on several leads. They experimented with non-traditional techniques, going so far as to use hypnosis to elicit further information about Shelly Ann Warner's kidnapping and tragic death. These attempts, however, produced no significant results, and the case finally fizzled out. Finally, decades later, a reluctant witness came forward, motivated by a sense of duty and the bravery to speak up. This person named 3 people connected to Shelly Ann's case. According to detectives, the witness waited until 2 of the suspects had died before speaking out because they were originally afraid of taking revenge on their family. Even though the 3rd suspect had disappeared over time and the other 2 had already died, this new information gave rise to new hopes for justice. Fairness. This information gave detectives a new lease on life, and they decided to reopen the case with the intention of bringing Shelly Ann Warner's story to light. Investigators discovered other witnesses and a wealth of fresh evidence as the investigation went on, all of which strongly corroborated the witnesses' first account. The case's credibility was increased by the growing body of evidence. While conducting their investigations, the investigators came across a shocking finding. As of 2018, The third suspect who had previously disappeared was officially dead. Additionally, 2 suspects had died, one in 2001 and another in 2010. Cold case team member Dave Dossman underlined how the suspect's death led to a significant witness coming forward and providing vital information. The St. Joseph County Prosecutor's Office declared the evidence against the 3 suspects to be conclusive in 2023 after carefully reviewing all of the statements and evidence that had been collected. However, officials were unable to press charges against the 3 suspects because they had all died. Since no charges could be brought against the accused, their names were never made public. Following the conclusion of the inquiry, law enforcement officials revealed that Warner's assault was not an isolated incident. Although Shelly Ann Warner was not personally acquainted with the suspects, she was somewhat acquainted with some of their relatives. Dossman's admission confirmed a harsh reality. Though it wasn't immediately clear, Shelly Ann Warner knew the suspects. Dossman clarified the relationship by saying that she would have known who these individuals were and vice versa. The chief detective revealed the sobering truth about the reasons for the delays as he thought back on the protracted inquiry. The perpetrator's intimidation and threats against possible witnesses halted the investigation. They scared not just the witnesses but also their relatives. The case was reluctantly terminated after an agonizing 43 years, despite the fact that the culprits were never brought before the scales of justice. For the family, not even time has provided them closure. Shelly Ann's sister is the only surviving link to a tragic history after her parents passed away. Although her sister took solace in the case's eventual resolution, the unfulfilled justice and lack of recognizable DNA on the evidence delivered to the lab acted as a somber reminder of what could never be recovered. If Shelly Ann Warner's wonderful life hadn't been taken so violently, she would have turned 58 today. This terrible tale concludes without justice being served, leaving a legacy of unresolved issues and a yearning for what may have been. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed exploring these intriguing cold cases with us. If you found the video fascinating, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to Cold Case Mystique for more deep dives into unsolved mysteries. Your support helps us bring you more compelling content. Leave a comment below with your thoughts or any cases you'd like us to cover next. See you in the next video, and remember, the search for truth never stops.